2008 race for the Democratic nomination marks the closest a woman has ever come to being a major party's presidential candidate. Hillary Clinton is the United States' first viable female candidate. However, dozens of women preceded her in an attempt to attain the country's highest office. So who were some of these women, and why did they run? Throughout most of history, women generally had fewer legal rights and career opportunities than men. Wifehood and motherhood were regarded as women's most significant professions. Women were viewed as second-class citizens, denied basic rights like the right to own property and the right to an education. Furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, they were denied the right to vote, which by its very nature prevented women from having any legal recourse to correct any of the wrongs inflicted upon them by society. This gradually began to change in the 20th century as women around the world won the right to vote and increased their educational and job opportunities. As Americans, we typically think of ourselves as progressive, global leaders, but the fact is that when compared with other democracies, the United States has been slow to recognize its women as full citizens. American women had to endure a long, arduous battle, lasting more than 70 years before the 19th Amendment was finally passed. By this time, 26 other countries had already enfranchised their women.
We've gone from not having the right to vote and to be able to participate in public decision making to, being the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So obviously there's been a great deal of shift in the last 100 years. Women have made enormous strides on the public stage. Gender roles and divisions of labor and expectations about capabilities have changed dramatically in this country.
Oh my goodness. The world has changed for women in recent years, and it's much more common to see women in very high public places than it was 50 years ago or whatever.
From the time this nation was founded, women have raised questions about their rights in a free society. Even before women were afforded the right to vote, they've been seeking public office, and more importantly, the presidency. Though many had no chance of winning, they ran because being a candidate offered them a platform to discuss and bring to light issues they felt were of importance. The first woman to declare herself a candidate for president was Victoria Claflin Woodhull. She announced her candidacy for president on April 2, 1870 by writing a letter to the New York Herald, an action that was completely unheard of at the time. Not only were women not allowed to vote, Woodhull was not even old enough to legally become president. Though Woodhull had many supporters, she could not receive votes from a majority of them, as it would still be another 50 years before the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Woodhull may have been the first woman to declare herself a presidential candidate, but the first woman to actually campaign was Belva Ann Bennett Lockwood. Fascinated by politics, Lockwood moved to Washington, D.C. from New York and earned her degree from what is now George Washington University Law School. After her graduation, she became the first woman to try a case before the United States Supreme Court. Her interest in both law and politics led her to run in the presidential elections of 1884 and 1888. Like Woodhull, she strongly advocated equal opportunities for women. However, her candidacy was opposed by some notable suffrage leaders who believed that the ridicule she drew from the public greatly hurt their cause. But not all voters were dissuaded. Lockwood claimed that she received 4,711 votes in 7 states in 1884. This encouraged her to try again 4 years later, Although this time around, her campaign was much more modest, and there's no record as to how successful it was. After Lockwood, it would be decades before another woman would receive votes for President of the United States. Margaret Chase Smith, a longtime member of Congress, became the first credible female candidate for president when she announced her intention to run in 1964. Unlike her predecessors, she had legislative experience and was highly respected.
The senator from Maine, Margaret Chase Smith, vows she's still in the race. She made a surprisingly good showing in several state primaries.
Although most states did not yet conduct primaries, Smith ran in those that did and won the votes of 27 delegates at the Republican National Convention. The Republican Party nominated the more conservative Barry Goldwater as their candidate, but Smith's efforts were nationally respected.
Margaret Chase Smith is definitely sort of a pioneer and a trailblazer that we forget a great deal about. She was the first woman to win a seat both in the House and in the Senate. And not a lot of people know this, but she also is I believe is one of the first to have received delegates for her nomination at the party convention. She ran in the Goldwater race in '64, and she had delegates when they came to the National Convention that elected Barry Goldwater as their nominee. And if you recall, in that Goldwater campaign, he lost. He was trounced in the general election. Maybe the party should have taken, their electoral losses, their significant electoral losses, to heart and learn something back then about the need to perhaps, back a woman candidate.
Another Congresswoman would soon follow in Senator Smith's presidential footsteps. Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman elected to Congress, also became the first black woman to run for President of the United States on January 23, 1972.
I met Shirley Chisholm 26 years ago when I was the director and editor for a pilot show that we were producing at the local television station here in Washington, D.C., Channel 20. The pilot that we were doing was for a children's show. So now you have to understand, the people who were interviewing her on camera was, at the time, an 11-year-old girl and a puppet.
In 1972, you became the first woman and first black to run for president. Could you tell us what it was like?
Oh, it was a very exciting experience, Wendy. Very challenging. Just imagine getting up in the mornings and running, going all over the country and telling people that you wanted to be considered seriously for the presidency of the United States of America. And of course, it was sometimes quite disappointing and upsetting because never before had a black person and a woman gone out to the public and told the public that they desired to be the head of state, desired to be the president of the United States.